You have probably spent years believing that you need to defend your choices, correct misunderstandings, and fight for your place in the world. You carry the heavy burden of trying to control how others perceive you. This constant state of reaction is exactly what keeps you stuck in the same exhausting cycles. Freedom is found in the opposite direction. It is found in the profound realization that you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your growth. There is a unique kind of peace reserved for those who learn the art of restraint. Reclaim your timeline and protect your peace. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, everything falls into place. Chapter 1: The Fortress of Silence. Society has fundamentally misunderstood the nature of silence. We have been conditioned to view quietness as a symptom of weakness or a sign of fear. We assume that the person who does not speak is the person who has nothing to say, or worse, that they have been defeated by the sheer volume of the world. But this is a shallow interpretation of human nature. Real silence is not the place where you hide because the environment has become too loud. It is the fortress you build when you finally remember your own power. Think about the immense energy it takes to constantly react. Every time you try to win a trivial argument, every time you defend your choices to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, and every time you perform your emotions for a public audience, you are giving away pieces of your foundation. You are leaving the gates of your mind completely unguarded, allowing anyone to wander in and steal your peace. Silence is the exact opposite of this surrender. It is a deliberate and masterful withdrawal of your energy from things that simply do not matter. Ancient philosophers understood this deeply, conceptualizing it as building an inner citadel. It is an impenetrable fortress within your own mind, a place where external events, insults, and the chaotic opinions of others cannot reach you. When you choose silence, you are pulling your energy back into this citadel. You stop fighting meaningless battles in the mud and start fortifying your own walls. There is an incredible psychological power in withholding your reaction. When provoked, the average person will immediately erupt. They will try to explain, defend, or attack. They lay all their cards on the table, desperate to be understood or vindicated right in that very moment. But the person who meets provocation with calm, unbroken silence becomes an absolute mystery. When you stop talking and start observing, you become unreadable. People can easily manipulate the angry. They can disturb the distracted. They can easily control the fragile ego that is starving for validation. But a silent person who is entirely focused inward is impossible to move. Your lack of reaction acts as a mirror, forcing others to face their own noise, their own chaos, and their own insecurity. Embracing this fortress of silence means you no longer measure your value by the noise surrounding your name. You realize that your voice is a precious resource, and you refuse to waste it on closed ears or empty rooms. You let people think what they want to think. You let them say what they want to say. You finally understand that their perception of you is their burden to carry, not yours. Your only responsibility is the architecture of your own character. Chapter 2: The Illusion of the Audience. We live in an era where everyone feels an overwhelming urge to announce their evolution. You decide to start a new project, break a bad habit, or completely change the trajectory of your life, and the very first instinct is to tell the world about it. We are addicted to being seen before we are truly ready. We want the respect before the routine is strong, and we want the victory before the private work has shaped our character. But there is a dangerous psychological trap hidden in this constant broadcasting. When you talk about your goals and detail your plans to others, your brain releases dopamine. It gives you a premature sense of accomplishment. You feel the satisfaction of having done the hard work without actually moving a single inch forward. This is exactly why so many people speak with intense fire but act with complete laziness. They consume the reward of validation before they have even planted the seed. Announcing becomes a cheap substitute for doing. You must deeply realize that your life is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial. You do not need to present evidence of your growth to a jury of your peers. The constant urge to explain yourself stems from a lingering insecurity, a belief that your reality is not valid until someone else acknowledges it. But the most profound transformations in this world happen without an audience. The seed does not argue with the soil to prove it has the potential to become a massive tree. The mountain does not explain its height. The river does not beg anyone to believe it is moving. They simply exist, doing the quiet, relentless work of being exactly what they are meant to be. Not every dream needs a stage, and certainly not every plan needs an announcement. When you expose your early ideas and fragile ambitions to the world, you are handing over something incredibly precious to people who have no right to touch it. You invite doubt, jealousy, and unsolicited criticism into a sacred space that requires absolute focus. People will project their own fears and limitations onto your vision. They will tell you why your path is impossible simply because they could not walk it themselves. This is why you must protect your vision in complete silence until it is strong enough to stand in the rough winds of reality. You have to be entirely willing to work in the dark. Let people assume you are doing nothing. Let them underestimate you. The desperate need for immediate validation is the enemy of lasting greatness. When you stop inviting spectators into the construction zone of your life, you reclaim an immense amount of power. You take all that life force you used to spend on convincing others and channel it directly into building your foundation. Let the results speak for themselves when the time is right. Or better yet, reach a point where you no longer care if the results speak at all, because you know you are no longer performing for a crowd. You are building a masterpiece for yourself. Chapter 3: Reclaiming Your Currency. Your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. It is more valuable than your time and far more valuable than your money. Wherever your attention goes, your life inevitably follows. If your attention is constantly directed at other people's opinions, your life becomes their property. If your attention is locked on comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, your peace becomes a hostage. Consider how much energy you leak on a daily basis. Every time you engage in empty gossip, every time you endlessly scroll through digital spaces out of habit, and every time you allow a stranger's fleeting comment to trigger a wave of anger, you are bleeding your life force. You are taking the exact fuel required to build your future and throwing it into a bottomless pit of distraction. You are volunteering to be a background character in other people's narratives instead of writing your own. But imagine what happens when you practice radical focus. Imagine the sheer force of taking 100% of that scattered, wasted energy and funneling it directly back into your own existence. When your attention returns to your breath, your body, your habits, and your daily choices, you suddenly transition from being a scattered leaf in the wind to a deeply rooted tree. You become a collected person, and a collected person is a very formidable force in this world. When you reclaim your attention, you stop asking the world to carry the weight of your unfinished inner work. You stop expecting external circumstances to suddenly hand you clarity, motivation, and peace. Instead, you begin the quiet, meticulous work of building those qualities within yourself. You wake up no longer asking who is watching you, but asking if you are watching yourself. You monitor your own standards, your own discipline, and your own progress. Naturally, this radical shift will change the landscape of your relationships. When you stop participating in what weakens you, the wrong things and the wrong people will begin to fall away by themselves. Do not be surprised when people complain that you have changed. Some will call you distant simply because they have lost access to your unbridled reactions. Some will call you cold or arrogant because you are no longer available to entertain their daily drama or shrink your potential to make them feel comfortable. Let them complain. A heavy door does not apologize for closing when the room requires protection. Your newfound silence and focus will swiftly reveal who genuinely supports your growth and who only liked you when you were confused and accessible. Reclaiming your currency means making absolute peace with the fact that not everyone gets to come with you to the next chapter of your life, and you are entirely okay with that. Chapter 4: The Winter Season of Growth. There is a profound lesson hidden in the cycles of the natural world, particularly in the harshness of winter. If you look at a massive tree in the dead of the cold months, it appears completely barren. To the untrained eye, it looks defeated, stripped of its leaves and completely stagnant. But beneath the frozen, quiet surface of the earth, a massive amount of work is taking place. The tree is not dying. It is directing every ounce of its energy downward, expanding its roots, digging deeper into the soil, and fortifying its foundation to support the heavy growth that the coming spring will demand. This is exactly what you must undergo when you decide to focus entirely on yourself. You must enter your own winter season. Some call this a period of isolation, but whatever name you give it, it is a deeply sacred time. When you strip away the constant socializing, the endless digital scrolling, and the desperate need to be seen, your life might suddenly look very small to the outside observer. You might even feel a sharp, lingering sense of loneliness at first. Understand that this falling away of your old habits and old crowds will often feel like a profound loss before it finally feels like true freedom. We live in a society that is absolutely terrified of boredom and isolation. People want the cinematic montage of success, but they run away from the unglamorous reality of what it actually takes to change. Real and lasting transformation is deeply unexciting on the surface. It happens in the quiet, dark hours of the early morning when the rest of the world is still sleeping. It is found in the tedious repetition of training, studying, and healing when no one is around to applaud your effort. It is the heavy silence of doing the work when every part of your mind is begging you to seek out a cheap distraction. During this hidden season, you will experience days when you look around and think nothing is happening. You will put in the disciplined hours and see zero immediate return. This is the exact moment when most people break. They abandon the process because they cannot survive the invisibility of their own growth. They want the flower before they have built the root. But the foundation must be poured and set in the dark before the house can ever be seen. The steel must be subjected to the brutal, repetitive pounding of the hammer long before it becomes a sharpened blade. Do not insult your winter season just because the crowd cannot see your progress. You must learn to fall completely in love with the silent, repetitive architecture of building your life. You must reach a point where your daily mood is no longer the master of your overarching mission. The quiet, repetitive actions you take in the dark are the very things that will make you unshakable in the light. Embrace the isolation, trust the invisible work, and let your roots grow deep. Chapter 5: Restraint over Revenge. There is a very common trap that catches people the moment they decide to improve their lives. They use their past pain as the primary fuel for their future. They tell themselves that they are going to become wildly successful simply to show everyone who ever doubted them how wrong they were. They want to make the people who walked away regret their decision. They want to make their former critics feel completely foolish. While this anger can provide a massive temporary spike in motivation, it is ultimately a deeply flawed foundation to build a life upon. If your entire journey of self-improvement is essentially an elaborate reaction to the people who hurt you, you are still in bondage to them. Your success is still entirely dependent on their hypothetical reaction. Even if you are winning in front of them, you are still letting the ghosts of your past dictate your movements in the present. The strongest version of you will never be born from the toxic desire for revenge. True, unshakable power is born entirely from restraint. Revenge keeps your precious energy tied directly to the source of your pain. Restraint, however, pulls all of that energy back and invests it into the person you are actively becoming. The highest form of power in this world is genuine indifference. It is the ability to walk away from a chaotic situation without needing to win the final argument. It is the quiet confidence of moving forward without ever receiving the apology you absolutely deserved. When you focus on yourself, you realize that your path is far too important to be treated as a performance for your critics. You are truly free only when the people who wronged you are no longer the reason you make your moves. You move because your soul knows it is time. You build because your future demands a capable guardian. This brings us to the absolute mastery of the pause. The untrained mind is like a wild animal. It reacts to everything. It feels like an insult and immediately snaps back. It feels a sudden urge and instantly acts on it, believing that a quick, aggressive reaction is a display of strength. But the trained mind understands the supreme wisdom of timing. There is a small, quiet space between a triggering external event and your internal reaction to it. Within that tiny space lies your entire capacity for freedom. Before you send that angry message, you pause and breathe. Before you aggressively defend your ego, you observe the feeling without actually becoming it. Mastering this pause is how you stop letting your temporary emotions sabotage your long-term peace. You learn to let go of the burning need to correct every misunderstanding and simply let people be wrong about you. When your silence speaks louder than your anger, you have truly mastered yourself. Chapter 6: Substance versus Image. In the modern world, the vast majority of people are exhausted because they are living deeply divided lives. They wear one face for the internet, present another face to their friends, and hide behind a completely different face when they are entirely alone. We have been conditioned to believe that success is about curating an aesthetic. We spend an immense amount of our daily energy trying to manage our public avatars, constantly adjusting how we are perceived by others. But this performance is a full-time job that leaves your soul completely bankrupt. When you spend all your strength maintaining an image, you have absolutely nothing left to build actual substance. There is a profound difference between the two. The image requires constant, exhausting maintenance. It is loud, it is needy, and it constantly begs for the crowd's attention. Because it is hollow on the inside, an image is incredibly fragile. A single rumor can shake it. A minor public failure can completely shatter it. If you build your entire identity on how people perceive you, all it takes is one season of necessary silence for the world to forget you exist. Substance is an entirely different architecture. Substance does not need to announce itself because it is built through the quiet, rigorous application of daily discipline. Many people try to build their lives on the fleeting emotion of motivation, but motivation is merely a visitor. It shows up when you feel good, when the weather is nice, and when people are cheering for you. Discipline must become the actual house you live in. Motivation will make you talk about your grand plans, but discipline forces you to shut your mouth and do the heavy lifting in the dark. Building substance means you stop acting like a passing guest in your own life and start governing your internal kingdom. It is rooted in how you carry yourself when there is absolutely nothing to gain. It is forged in how you handle intense pressure, how you treat people who can do nothing for you, and most importantly, how you keep the quiet promises you make to yourself when nobody is watching. When you focus on yourself, your internal reality finally aligns with your external presence. You stop performing and start becoming. The self-respect that is generated from this kind of alignment cannot be stolen, shaken, or erased by any external force, because it was never borrowed from the crowd in the first place. You become bulletproof not because you have a perfect image, but because you know exactly what you are made of when the room goes completely quiet. There comes a definitive moment when all this quiet, invisible work finally culminates in a completely new reality. When you stop bleeding your precious energy into the endless noise of the world, a profound internal shift takes place. This is not some mystical accident or a sudden stroke of luck. It is the undeniable law of cause and effect. By intentionally removing the chaotic voices and opinions of everyone else, you finally clear enough space to hear the one voice that actually matters, your own intuition. You begin to realize that your past confusion was never a lack of direction. It was simply an overdose of external noise. This is the exact point where everything begins to fall into place. Your personal boundaries transform into absolute walls of steel, effortlessly filtering out the people, environments, and habits that no longer serve your ultimate growth. The right circumstances and opportunities suddenly begin to align with your path, not because you are desperately running after them, but because you have finally become the kind of person who naturally attracts them. The relentless, exhausting anxiety of trying to control how the world perceives you simply evaporates. Peace is no longer a fleeting emotion you have to chase. It becomes your unshakable default state. Do not let another year slip away while you stand on the stage of your own life, exhausting yourself to perform for an empty room. The time for grand announcements is over. The time for arguing with your own potential has passed. Put down the heavy burden of needing to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Step back from the crowd, Embrace the powerful fortress of your own silence, and begin the deep, private work of building a life that feels solid on the inside, rather than one that merely looks good on the outside. Reclaim your focus. Protect your energy. Stay silent. And watch how beautifully everything falls into place.